I think everybody kind of knew that he would do really well with the interviews. I mean, no one's ever questioned his, intelligence, his football IQ, his off-the-field stuff. I think we have to wait till tomorrow. And even more than that, the pro day to see how he's able to handle, the kind of NFL throws, because that's where it can all kind of go off the rails. And you saw it last year with Teddy Bridgewater. Remember, at this time last year, he was the number one rated prospect in the entire draft. Ended up going number 32. So things can still happen.
John, obviously, this is a interesting time because Winston and Mariota, the two top guys, both at the Combine, now contemplating throwing or not. Winston, I guess, announced he will throw. Do you think that was a smart decision, and are you surprised? What do these guys have to gain by throwing at the Combine? Typically, if you're the best, you let people come to you.
Yeah, it's rare. I guess the only thing you can say about it is it shows some self-confidence, and people take note of that. Because, as you mentioned, it's not the normal thing to do. If you're rated as one of the top quarterbacks, generally you wait to throw until your pro day when you have a more comfortable environment. You have familiar receivers to toss it to. It's just the way most people have gone about it in recent seasons. So I think it speaks highly. Both have said they're going to throw. The kind of wavering, Jameis Winston had the story came out about shoulder issues, but he wants to kind of downplay that, so he's going to do it. And I think Mariota's going to do it. And I agree with you. There's really not that much to gain, and there's a lot to lose. So I'm a little surprised that both are even contemplating it.
Yeah, and one of the things, John, that I'm a little surprised at coming out of this is the fact that Winston at one point, it seemed like, had the off-the-field stuff, but he was, by far and away the better player. Now all of a sudden he's got weakness in his throwing arm and he's going to throw. It almost seems like he feels that he was slipping a little bit, where people were almost giving him the benefit of the doubt that, hey, you are the better quarterback here. You don't really need to prove yourself. And now all of a sudden, it looks like he's the guy who's trying to prove himself all of a sudden.
Yeah, I don't know, because if you listen to Lovie Smith, I kind of, he kind of wore his heart on his sleeve, so to speak. I mean, he really didn't play a lot of games. He gushed, and he kind of, if anything, tried to downplay some of the red flags. And, I kind of wrote that day, it's, you can lock in your number ones on your mock draft because it's going to be Jameis Winston. I still feel that way. The only thing that can kind of muck that up is if there's something structurally wrong with the shoulder. I mean, injuries can always affect things like that. But I think as far as, who's the better player, I remain steadfast. Most scouts will tell you that Winston is way ahead of Mariota as far as projecting to a typical pro offense. Now that changes when you talk about Philadelphia, but for most of the league, Winston's way ahead of the curve, except for the off the field stuff, and that's legitimate. But Tampa Bay was kind of downplaying that as much as possible. So,
are you surprised by that, though, Lovie Smith? We had Josh McCown on before he was cut. We seem to be the kiss of death. You come on the show, and then you get cut the next day, typically. But he was on, and he said, I don't think that Winston is the kind of guy Lovie would endorse. Are you surprised that Lovie Smith is endorsing almost Winston?
Well, a little bit. So, at least so strongly, but I think it's born out of desperation. I mean, there's really only two quarterbacks with first-round grades, and I don't see Tampa Bay wanting to change their whole culture. So basically, it's one quarterback for them. It's either, hit or miss. It's one guy or look at a different position. And I don't think they can afford to do that. So unfortunately, they're kind of behind the eight ball. And it's basically almost they have to take Winston because they need a quarterback so badly. And again, I just don't – if you think about Lovie Smith and his history, and obviously he's a defensive-minded guy, but I just don't see them going to an offense that will – rely on a lot of read option and some of the up-tempo mobility things that Mariota does so well. So I don't think he's an option for him. So he kind of had to almost.
All right, let's look at some other NFL things here. Of course, the Combine, a big thing happening, but there are some other NFL stories out there, including the possibility, John, of the San Diego Chargers and the Oakland Raiders moving to a stadium together in L.A. How important is it to the NFL, do you think, to get somebody in L.A., and is this something here that you think can work, putting two teams into L.A. after having none for 20 years?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the NFL's dream, to have the sort of the Giants Jets setup that there is at MetLife Stadium, and it was to have, two teams kind of share it. And when we all talk about the Los Angeles market, the most logical teams are the ones with the history in Los Angeles, and that's obviously the Raiders, Chargers, and St. Louis Rams, which would be the third. And they're talking about a stadium in Inglewood. So, the NFL for years has wanted back in the market, but they've wanted a first-class facility. They're not, they don't want anything to do with the Coliseum or the Rose Bowl. So that's been the holdup. That's why it's taken so long. We say it almost every year when we talk about it. It's going to get done. There's going to be a team that goes back there, and there's been so many teams over the years that have used Los Angeles as sort of a crutch against their own particular cities to get new stadiums. It's happened time and time again, and that's what's going on here. I mean, there's a way San Diego can keep the Chargers. There's a way that Oakland can keep the Raiders, and St. Louis is doing everything they can, but they're being held hostage, and it's been that way for years. Eventually, though, a stadium's going to be built, and there's going to be at least one team that.
John, what is your thoughts on the Adrian Peterson thing? Is this, the Vikings sound like they want to play nice. He's saying, I don't know if I feel comfortable going back there. Where will that ultimately end?
I think it's going to end in divorce. I just wrote about it today. I don't think Adrian Peterson is very happy with the organization, specifically Kevin Warren, who was just promoted recently, the COO of the organization. He believes he kind of threw him under the bus and didn't defend him. And I think there's a lot of bad blood there. I think there's different parts of the organization. I think the football side of things, Mike Zimmer would love to have him back. It just makes a lot of sense. We just talked about Teddy Bridgewater. He looks like an emerging star. And if you put Adrian Peterson in the backfield with him, it's only going to make things easier. So in a football sense, I think that side of the building wants him. I think Kevin Warren was very, very concerned last season about the brand and about sponsors leaving and all those kind of off-the-field things. And he was kind of the one that led the negotiation with the NFL to put him on that commissioner's exempt list. And Peterson, it seems, is not forgetting that. And there's a lot of bad blood there.
We also have the opportunity to this offseason possibly to vote on penalties into replay challenges. I know that's been something that's been a little bit of a topic of conversation. And is that something that you think, John, is going to end up getting done, that you will now be able to challenge penalties on replay?
Well, I know Bill Belichick's been a big proponent. Jeff Fisher, the head of competition committee, said they're going to take it up. They're going to look at it. At the end of the day, you want them to get things right. And when you look at specifically PI, pass interference penalties, there's so many that are, egregiously wrong and week to week. And they're such, impactful penalties. You could be so many times we've seen a quarterback just throw it up downfield and you have all of a sudden 40, 50-yard gain. I think the better way to go would move towards the college rule as far as pass interference and maybe go to a 15-yard penalty if it's, instead of those huge gashes. But, to slow down the game, to look at every single pass interference penalty or thing like that, I just don't see how it's doable.
John McMullen, the NFL editor, sportsnetwork.com. So much going on, some news and notes here as we continue on. How about Julius Thomas, the tight end? I think in this great free agent class, he's almost kind of like a forgotten guy. Do you think he'll be a guy back in Denver, or do you think someone breaks the bank to bring him to their offense?
Yeah, it's looking like he's going to move on. Denver's kind of in the same type of situation as Dallas is in, and that they have two very, very good players. set to become free agents on March 10th, and Demaryius Thomas and Julius Thomas. And you can only franchise one of them. And if push comes to shove, and John Elway's already said if they have to, they're going to put the tag on Demaryius Thomas. I don't know quite what's going on with the Broncos, because obviously the first domino to fall has yet to fall, and besides the coaching staff, obviously, and that's, is Peyton Manning going to come back?
Right.
And there's conflicting signals. I mean, obviously changing and moving Adam Gase out of there, not only John Fox, but Peyton Manning's not going to be happy with that. He's got a big cap number, and there's some people that think that John Elway just wants to move on. I think that would be a poor decision. I certainly think they want to renegotiate the deal and make it more salary cap friendly, but that's not been Peyton Manning's history. He's not gone that Tom Brady route, so to speak. He's always, reach for the brass ring as far as money goes, and I don't know if he's going to be acquiescing to something like that. So, it makes more sense to bring Julius Thomas back if Peyton Manning's there. If he's not, I think it's pretty clear that Denver's going to look to move on, because they just don't want to allocate that kind of money it's going to take to bring him back.
John, thoughts on Lynch here? Marshawn Lynch, obviously, there's a lot of people who are up in the air on whether he's going to come back or not. Do you think this is him just being him, or legitimately thinking about retirement?
Well, I think he legitimately wants more money, and I think he'll get more money. I find it very hard to believe he's going to walk away. Even if he didn't get a bump in pay, and the Seahawks have already, made it clear he will be, he'd be walking away from $7 million a year, and somebody to do that in the prime of their career. People always talk about Jim Brown walking away, but the money wasn't like it is now. The only comparable, I could say, Robert Smith walked away at the apex of his career. But it's very, very rare, and I just don't see Marshawn Lynch, leaving whatever it ends up being, $8-9 million on the table.
John, what about Byron Maxwell, the free agent? A lot of people think the Eagles could go down that road, that he could be a good fit for them. Is he a guy that you think Seattle will let get away, and would Philly be a good landing spot for him?
Yeah, it would be. I don't think there's any question he's going to move on from Seattle. The Seahawks kind of know. I mean, he's going to get overpaid, and that's just the nature of free agency if you get there. And I like Byron Maxwell as a player, but he's not a top-tier, number one shutdown corner. But because of the success the Seahawks defense has had over the years, you see it time and time again. Sort of those complementary players get to free agent, they get overpaid. I think he's an upgrade on what the Eagles had, but you are going to have to overpay. So you have to enter that in the equation. And if people think he's going to come in there and be the Eagles version of Richard Sherman, that's not going to happen. That's not kind of the kind of player he is. But he is an upgrade over what they have.
And no doubt, but looking for about $10 million a year. I mean, the Eagles going to want to pay a guy $10 million a year at that spot. That's obviously a steep price here. John, let's look at Robert Griffin III. Were you surprised that he got a little vote of confidence by the Redskins there?
Well, no, because I think if Jay Gruden wants to be a head coach in the NFL, he's going to have to try to make it work. So that's the bottom line. I think. We all know Daniel Snyder's history with RG3, and you saw Mike Shanahan kind of come out this week on a Washington area radio station about some of the things he had to deal with.
Wild stuff.
And Gruden's having to deal with those same types of things. And, at some point, Robert Griffin III is either going to have to change his ways and start, understanding that it's a two-way street and you can't just have everything the way you want it. But he's been, coddled like that for so long, dating back, certainly to college, maybe even high school when you're that talented. And Daniel Snyder's done it in the pros, which is very, very rare. And I think it's hurt him in the long run, because I think it's pretty clear he doesn't understand what it takes to be successful at this level at the quarterback position. We've had now coach after coach try to impart that to him. It hasn't worked thus far. He'll get one more chance, and I think this will be it. And if Jay Gruden goes, then you have that tab as a coach killer. And, at some point, Daniel Snyder's going to have to come to his senses.
John McMullen, the national NFL columnist at sportsnetwork.com, here on The Bash. And, of course, a lot of NFL news and notes, the Combine. For more, go to 97.3 ESPN.com. At JF McMullen on Twitter, as the NFL really got a lot of news and notes as free agency beginning in about 2 weeks from now. John, as always, pleasure.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike.